All right, we're here with the one and only Honorable Chris Giancarlo, the co-founder of the Digital Dollar Project, former CFTC chairman, incredible author, husband, father, and everything else. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. After that introduction, how can I be doing anything other than feeling great? Thank you so much, Brad.
Hey, thank you, man. No doubt. Anything for the crypto dad. Listen, I want people to understand that you are going to be at XRP Las Vegas on stage with a fireside chat with you and we've already sculpted out the areas we're going to touch on. And I don't mind telling people that we're going to hit some areas that I have never heard you really comment on before. And I'm just going to kind of overview for everybody so they get a touch on it here. So Chris, one of the things you have touched on before, and we will get there in the conversation, is the fact of the importance and the right to privacy. And this extends not only to our money, but you have made the excellent point that I've not seen many others do about what has happened to social media and how they've become this outsourced third arm of the government and administrations. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's become quite apparent to anybody who's paid any attention that social media platforms have been utilized almost as arms of the government. And it's not even, one doesn't need to get into Republicans versus Democrats and all that tribalism. It's just quite apparent that social media in this country and elsewhere have censored heterodox opinions on things like the efficacy of mask mandates, the origins of the COVID virus, of the efficiency or censored conversations about side effects of the vaccines. And this is not even tinfoil hat stuff. This has come out in major litigation that's taken place in the federal courts, where a number of states led by Missouri have sued the federal government, and in their discovery have found just reams and reams of email from like a dozen or more government agencies. It's not like it just came out of the Oval Office. This was, one government agency after another, not just law enforcement agencies that have both basically told social media platforms what conversations can take place online and worse, what conversations cannot take place online. So the reason why that's important when we talk about digital currency is a concern that I've expressed. Look, I'm a big believer. Anybody who knows my work knows I am a big believer in a future internet of value, that the internet is going to transform finance, banking, and money itself, the way it's transformed everything we already know about social interaction, about communications, about retail shopping and photography. And it's going to do the same thing to finance. And unlike perhaps others of my generation that conflate financial stability, preserving the status quo, I believe that the best way to preserve financial stability and the American way of life, which starts from the dollar as the world's reserve currency, is not to resist innovation, but to embrace innovation. And during my time at the CFTC, we did not resist the call for a Bitcoin future. We actually engaged with crypto and created not only the United States' first regulated crypto marketplace, the world's first regulated crypto marketplace in December of 2017, when we greenlighted Bitcoin futures. Now, 5 years later, market is deep, it's liquid, it's growing, it's transparent, and most importantly, it's well regulated, which we proved. And I think this is proof that other US regulators should take note of, that regulators can successfully engage with digital assets and do so in a way that gives certainty to the financial community and to American citizens. So the reason why I think this issue of social media is so important as we're talking about digital assets and an internet of value is that as we look at stablecoin operators, we need to think about the example of social media platforms that government instructed to do things that would have otherwise been violative of the Constitution. They told them to censor speech, which government can't do, but social media platforms as private corporations can do. And my worry is, to the extent that government, in a sense, outsources the development of digital forms of the US dollar to big tech companies, those big tech companies then would be free to do things like surveillance and censorship that the government can't do over its own money because it's restricted from doing so from the Constitution. That's my concern, and I say that without any animus to some very fine stablecoin operators and developers that are working in the United States to do some very good work and creating an ability to put smart contracts on dollar-based instruments. And I'll end with this point, Brad. I believe, and this is the view of the Digital Dollar Project, that any development in terms of digital currency, whether it's sovereign or non-sovereign, whether it's government or private sector done, whether it's done by big tech companies or big banking operations, must be true to the values of the American democracy. It cannot be that a stablecoin operator can do things that the government is restricted from doing, like surveilling, like censoring, like controlling how Americans engage in economic activity.
Absolutely. That's so well said. And, man, there's so many places I could go from here. You've set it up beautifully. It's like, where do we want to go next, right? It's like, so let's talk about this, because stable coins, right? That's really the first line of probably more than likely, and I'm speculating here, but reading the tea leaves from Capitol Hill, this seems like the first place where we may get some legislation. And I have been equating it for my audience as, it may be as powerful as the Telecommunications Act for the internet in 1996, right? And I really do believe it has the power to open up the internet and institutions in that way. But not just that, Chris, it also, when we have true legislation, this means that the financial sector, the banks, can come off the sidelines. There's no more sitting on the pine waiting for the OCC to tell them they can finally do this, right? And for the first time in history, banks will be 24/7, 365. This is going to forever change banking and the movement.
Absolutely. Well, but about it, here we are in 2024, and we're finally addressing the issue of why it's so slow to move money around the world, right? We broke through that in the 1980s and 90s with email. Communications now moves around the world in a second, and yet still it takes days, and it costs between 7 and 17% to move money around the world. It's easier if I need to get $10,000 to London to stick it in a suitcase and get on a plane and fly there than it is to try to wire the money there. So if we can move communications at the speed of sound, if we can move, or the speed of light, if we can do online purchases at the speed of light, why is the transmission of financial assets still so behind the times? And the answer is that there's much more friction in the evolution of financial systems than there is in the evolution of communication systems, or even in retail. I mean, Kodak yielded digital photography a lot faster than our traditional banking system is willing to yield to this new architecture. And when I talk to people about crypto, I said, put aside for a second thinking about crypto as just some funky new investment asset class, like some sort of, digital Beanie Babies or something. That's a very narrow view of this. This is much deeper. This is about a new architecture. It's an internet-based architecture of finance as opposed to a commercial balance sheet architecture of finance. Our current architecture is based upon things of value being recorded on the balance sheets of private commercial institutions, or publicly traded commercial, but individual commercial institutions, right? Whatever I've saved up for retirement, not stacks of $100 bills in Fidelity's vault with my name on it. It's nothing more than an IOU from Fidelity. And if Fidelity were to disappear and go bust overnight, for government insurance or other insurance, my retirement is gone. But that's our current architecture. Our current architecture records value on a balance sheet of what is likely a commercial, might be a government institution, but it's a single silo institution. If I need to move that value, I basically got to get the institution to allow me to move it, right? I mean, if I go to the bank and say, give me my money, there's about 5 different people who are going to prove that and where it's going and all that. internet provides a different architecture. And the same architecture allows me to text my son who's living in LA, happy birthday, with a photograph this morning when he turned 26. This new architecture is going to allow me to move money in the same way. Now, does that raise law enforcement issues? Does that raise government control? Of course it does. But preserving the status quo is never a good option for a dynamic country like the United States when there's new technological change. We've got to venture into that change, figure out the challenges, but also exploit the opportunities in the way the United States exploited the opportunities of the first wave of the internet 30 years ago. We didn't hold back, and we allowed some venerable institutions to go the way of the dodo bird because of that change, but we're all better off for it. And I say that with great fond reflections on the Kodak company and Sears Roebuck and other companies that were wiped out by e-commerce and online photography. The same has got to happen here. We can't be afraid of change. What we've got to do is engage with it, embrace it, in the same way that we did at the CFTC back in 2017.
I think that's a fantastic point. There's no question. And speaking of embracing it, let's shift now to the understanding, another side potential benefit of stable coins. Now, you have spent a lot of time explaining to people, how the right to privacy, whether it's a CBDC or a stable coin, has got to be respected, and to even go as far as to consider putting the rights of the Constitution over top of these things, or value protocols that these assets would move across to protect the people that are using it, which I think is a fantastic point. But there's another part of this conversation too, Chris. It's like, if we get the stablecoin legislation, albeit sooner or later, I think we get it. But when we get it and it's done right, if it allows private or financial institutions to issue stablecoins, this sounds like a brand new use case where stablecoins can act like a sponge to soak up these possibly hyperinflated dollars in the future. There are a lot of geopolitical events that are suggesting we could have some issues. There's been overprinting, there's been a pandemic, we know all the things that have been happening that have weighed down on the dollar's value. But I'm definitely a dollar dominance guy, and I'm an American patriot, and I want to see the dollar survive. Chris, can you talk about the possibility
Sure.
stablecoins being a sponge?
Well, look, Brad, you've got a smart audience, and they understand that the American way of life is built upon the dollar as the world's reserve currency, right? Our ability of our government to provide the services for American citizens, but quite frankly, the defense capability for the world, the world's policemen, is built upon its ability to fund that not just through the earnings of American taxpayers, but through the issuance of debt. And for a long time, the buyers of that debt, the dealers of that debt, were the world's large money center banks that would buy up that debt as a dealer does, put it in inventory, and then basically sell it to their customers. It's no different than a dealer of musical equipment buys inventory from the manufacturers and sells it to customers. In the same way, our banks would do the same. One of the consequences, one of maybe unintended consequences of the Dodd-Frank Act, and then a lot of the Basel requirements coming out of the Basel Committee on Banks, was to actually restrict banks' ability to inventory that government debt. And so our public officials at the Fed, Treasury, and elsewhere are very conscious of the fact that we're issuing more debt than ever before, and the absorbers, if you would, you use that phrase, that the buyers of that debt have less balance sheet capability, and we frankly have less banks than we did before the financial, less large banks. We've got more. The banks that we've got are bigger, but we don't have as diversified a banking sector as we used to have. So there's a search for a new source of demand for U.S. Treasuries. And one of the things that's driving Congress to put forward and eventually pass legislation, stablecoin legislation, which would, in a sense, validate and license stablecoin operators to operate in the United States under both federal and state licensing regimes, is a search for these stablecoin operators to be an additional source of demand for U.S. debt. Well, like you, Brad, I very much believe that we need to preserve the dollar. I argue that the dollar has not only been good for the United States, but it's been a net good for the world. I don't believe the last 30 years of globalization, of global trade from the undeveloped South to the developed North and back and forth would have taken place without the dollar serving as a reliable store of value, a reliable unit of account, and a reliable payment mechanism. All the values that all of the characteristics of a successful global currency. So we need to preserve that source, and I very much support the stablecoin legislation. However, I did an op-ed in the Hill newspaper this summer, pointing out what I still believe is one of the major flaws in this stablecoin legislation, and that flaw is as follows: the bill says not one word about privacy. Coins that are centralized will be huge honeypots of information about what each American spends their money on. And you know, in a capitalist economy, our vaunted, our honorable rights set out in the Bill of Rights, our freedom of expression, our freedom of religion, our freedom of assembly, are nothing more than how we spend our money in a capitalist system, right? The freedom of assembly means what organizations do I become a member of? Freedom of speech is, you know, what publications do I read? What publications do I subscribe to? Freedom of religion is what church do I attend? What synagogue do I attend, et cetera, et cetera. If all of that information is expressed financially, and private sector stablecoin operators, whether they be big banks or stablecoin operators, can surveil that information, then suddenly I don't really have those freedoms that the Constitution provides. So we really need to think about, while we preserve the dollar, we need to preserve the values on which the dollar has traditionally been recognized. There's another reason why I think the globe adopted the dollar as a global standard, not just because it was a good unit of account, store of value, or medium of exchange, but because it stood for values of free enterprise, of open societies, not closed societies, of free trade, and most importantly, a zone of economic privacy for lawful transactions. If we don't preserve the values of the dollar in this new digital future, we will undermine the value of the dollar in this digital future. Or to put it another way to preserve the dollar is not only protect its value by creating demand for US treasuries, but to protect its values of free enterprise, freedom of speech, free economic choice. In fact, I will tell you, the best way to make sure the dollar is the world's aspirational currency in the next 50 to 80 years is to preserve the values. In a world in which China's digital yuan is going to be a complete surveillance tool, not just for their domestic market, but for export to closed societies around the world that want to surveil their citizens, and will do a white label version of the digital yuan, not just for Europe that protects people's privacy from commercial exploitation, but not for government surveillance. The GDPR law that Europe is so proud of doesn't protect anybody from government surveillance. If we were to say in the United States, if that stablecoin law were to say, whether it's a sovereign CBDC digital dollar or whether it is a privately operated digital dollar, if it references the dollar, then it must preserve the values of the American society: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and freedom of economic activity for lawful transactions.
Oh, my goodness. So well said. Chris Giancarlo. Look, I want to let people know, Chris, we are going to be tackling topics on stage at a fireside chat at XRP Las Vegas in areas I've never, and I have followed everything you've done. You probably want to get a restraining order. No, I'm kidding. But I'm kidding. But no, you really are one of the most insightful people. And listen, and you're a rarity because you've held the position as a regulator. So you have the ability to see this from both sides of the equation, which is super, super important. And we're very grateful that you're able to be there with us. But we're going to tackle some
Hey, Brad,
topics.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm telling you, we're gonna take this conversation in so many interesting ways when we're out there. So I can't wait to get out to Vegas and spend some time with you and the great audience that's going to be there.
Oh, it's going to be super amazing, Chris. We're going to take on all of it. The Saudi Arabia joining BRICS, all of it. We're going to get into all of it, Chris. It's going to be amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Chris Giancarlo, thank you for being here, Chris. We will see you soon.
See you soon, Brad.
All right, bye-bye. All right, that was the Honorable Chris Giancarlo. What a great opportunity to speak with him. And I'm telling you guys, you're not going to believe what we're going on talk about at XRP Las Vegas. We've just ironed out the agenda for our fireside chat. It's going to be remarkable. You've never heard Chris talk about the idea of how to deal with a two-tiered banking system, stable coins versus CBDCs wholesale on the back end for the United States, the Saudi Arabia joining BRICS and the BRICS coalition, dumping and de-dollarizing, all of that's on the table. We've got it cleared for Chris, and we're going deep into it at XRP Las Vegas. And don't forget, you could have the opportunity to talk to Chris too, because you can go to the Future of Digital Asset Benefit Dinner by the Chamber of Digital Commerce. Brad Garlinghouse will be there. John Deaton will be there. Chris Giancarlo and Eleanor Terrett, and I'm sure a couple others. I'm going to be there. Digital Asset Investors going to be there. Look, there's going to be an incredible conversation going on throughout the course of those 2 days. I tell you, if you haven't done anything, don't look at this as a cost. Look at it as an investment. It's an investment to get the most knowledge that you can over the next 2 days of that conference, May 3rd, May 4th, and you are going to come away from that, and you will know more about what's happening in this space on a higher level, because look at the access of the people that we're going to be able to talk to and unlock that knowledge for ourselves. This is an amazing opportunity. I want to thank Chris. I want to thank all of you. And don't forget, VIP tickets are almost sold out. So if you want a VIP ticket, get it before it's gone, because the only thing that'll be available after that is general admission. So make sure you get your ticket today, and I'll catch all of you on the next one.